Good morning. Good morning, good morning, and welcome to our breakfast event, our live breakfast event. Hello, everyone, for jumping on. Karen Williams here. Lovely to see you. Coming from lockdown in Melbourne, here we are. Amazing that we're here as we were last year, but it's really exciting that we can continue, right? So I'm really thrilled that you're here. Thank you so much. And let me know who's here. I'd love to know who's on the call, who's jumping on while we all get started and get settled. So you might be at work, maybe if you're not in Melbourne, or you might be at the kitchen bench having brekkie, or out on your walk or your run. So wherever you are, I'm really thrilled and excited that you're here. We're talking about triggers today, and we all have them, don't we? I know I certainly do. So really excited to get into this conversation with you about how to catch your triggers sooner, and then how to, what to replace them with. What is it that we can do instead so that we don't go down that tunnel of or that rabbit hole of the trigger. So that's what we'll be talking about today. If you're here for the first time and you haven't been here at all through this last 12 months or so on our breakfast events, we call them breakfast events. Someone asked me the other day, where's the breakfast? When are you going to show me pictures of the breakfast? And the reason that they're called breakfast events is because when we first started them before COVID, like before last year, they were live, they were face to face. And so we would put on breakfast, and it was a beautiful event. And so we continued calling them breakfast events, even though we're not providing you breakfast. So hopefully you're having breakfast or you've had breakfast. So hi, Helen, lovely to see you. Hi, Nairi, nice to see you too. Hi, Jess. Hi, Chloe. Hi, Chloe, lovely to see you. Thank you for being here and welcome. Who else is here today? Tracy, thank you very much. The circuit break must agree with you. Yes, because I wake up looking like this, glowing with this light on me, right? Thank you. So welcome everybody. Oh, hi from New Zealand. Thank you for being here. Hi, Georgia. Hi, Lisa. Lovely to see you. So well done, all of you, for jumping up and getting organised so that you could be here and invest in yourself today. So as I was sharing, if you're here for the first time, we've been doing these events since April last year, and we're doing them fortnightly, and now we do them monthly. We had so much great feedback, and I love doing them as well to connect with you. So we decided to continue them monthly, even though we came out of lockdown. And now that we're back in lockdown, why not, right? So welcome if you're here for the first time. This is your opportunity to take a stop and pause, breathe moment and reflect, refresh and reset. So a great way to move into your weekend, whether you're in Melbourne or whether you're somewhere else, as in New Zealand, right? So make sure you've got your journal or your notebook and a pen. Make sure you've got your cup of tea or a glass of water. It's really helpful to give yourself that time and invest in your reflections, listen to the new learning and hear what each other's got to say, because we learn from each other, don't we? So thank you for being here and trusting yourself or trusting someone that recommended or referred you to be here. And if you're here and you've been here before, mwah, big love to you. Welcome back, and well done to you for continuing to show up. As I've shared with you, this is a community that does the work. We don't just talk about it. We don't just know it. We move from knowing to being. There's a lot of difference between knowing something and doing the courageous work. You know what it's like doing the courageous work to actually be it and become it. There's a big difference there. And so I honor and acknowledge you for being someone who does the work, because it's not easy, is it? So who else have we got? Anne. Hi, Anne. Lovely to see you. Eileen, I said hello to you. I think I've got that right. I hope so. Anybody else would like to say hello, please feel free to share in the chat box. And also, I'm just going to, let me get rid of that. Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. Excellent. So what's going to happen today is, because I'm controlling everything, I'll be reading your comments as we go through. I'd love to hear your questions. As a coach, the best way for me to give you more value is for you to ask me questions, and I can take us deeper into more awareness and to help support you to have a breakthrough in what you're working towards. And so if we haven't met before, I'm a transformational coach, a leadership coach. I work with executive and senior leaders, helping them lead with confidence, awareness and presence, and helping them communicate, engage and influence with their people. I also work with leaders and teams, helping them work better together. So I have an amazing team that works with me. We're growing our offerings all the time and our services, and especially online now with the new world that we live in. So if you'd like to know more about what we do, then you can get in touch post this webinar. We have a YouTube channel that you might like to check out as well. We've got over 100 videos on that now, and really proud of that product because it's something that we can just pick up videos from and just share with people who are interested in knowing how to be their best selves. So it's really exciting to me to have that resource. So jump on there anytime. You can find me there, Karen Williams Leadership Coach, and you'll get some great value there, hopefully, and some new insights for yourself. Hi, Jen, lovely to see you. Thank you for being here. All right, so as I shared with you, this is about triggers, and we're going to talk about what is a trigger. So I'm hoping everyone can hear me okay. If you can't, please let me know. What is a trigger? Why do we trigger? What's the value of triggers? Because they can feel very uncomfortable, can't they? So what's the value? And then what happens if we don't pull ourselves back from that trigger? And what's the cost to ourselves and others? We'll be looking at that. What, like the impact. And if we don't pull ourselves back, and what happens if we do? So what are the other options? And here's one of the things that's really important to know that's not often talked about when we talk about triggers, is that when we might catch ourselves and we might see it happening, right? And then if we bring ourselves back, then what? Because here's the thing, if we don't put something in that space, there's going to be a void, and the ego is going to go, great, I'll fill that void, let's go down that tunnel again. And that's something that you really need to know, and something that we don't always know or aware of or gets taught, is that void needs to be filled. It's like a vacuum. It's like, so if you're not putting something in that vacuum on purpose, as a new way of being, or creating yourself in a new way with conscious awareness and on purpose, that trigger is just going to fall right back in there, and you're just going to be back in that tunnel. Yeah. So it's something we'll talk about today as well. So hopefully that will be something that will be helpful for you. All right. So hopefully everyone's got their notebook and pen, and we'll get moving. I wanted to share with you my vision. So for those of you who haven't been here before, my ultimate vision, my big vision, and the vision that my team and I are working toward every day, and you're part of this vision by being here, is a community of leaders, a community of women in leadership and business who are doing the work on themselves, like base level. That's base level mindset, self-care, emotional health, doing that work consistently. Yeah. So then they can bring their best selves to their relationships, to their teams, to their work, and the contribution they want to make, whether that's in their family, community, or in the world. So that's then the opportunity of a whole new conversation that's way more exciting to me than anything else that could look like or sound like gossip or stuck in the past or problems. We know that we can't control what's happening around us, but we can control what's happening inside of us. And when we really get that, I know when I got that for myself, it changed everything. And so when you can come back to that for yourself and catch yourself when you're going off on tangents and not creating on purpose, and then put something in that's really aware and awake, then that shifts the quality of your conversation and your ability to influence people, yeah? And bring them, positively influence them, and bring them on the journey with you. So that's the vision we're creating, a community, ever-growing community of women in leadership and business. Now, these breakfast events are designed for women, but men join us too, and I really appreciate that because I work with men one-on-one as well, men in leadership and men who own their own business, and men in executive leadership as well. So I'm certainly not sexist, and certainly I don't call myself a feminist either. I'm a humanist. I'm for the empowerment of everybody. So thank you for allowing me to share that with you. So if you have any comments that you'd like to share through the session or any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box and I'll stop and check along the way. All right, so everyone good? Everyone with me so far? Everyone awake? So we're going to do today, so catching our triggers, yeah? So the first thing is what I want you to do is I want you to think about where you get tripped up. What are the flavor of your triggers? Are they quiet triggers and they go into retreat? Are they loud triggers and start to thrash around? So what's the flavor of a lot of your triggers? What does it sound like in your head? Is it a kind of like a victim, poor me type of situation? Or is it an angry, projecting out situation? Either, both of those states are victim, right? But there's a different quality or a different tone, a different flavor. Yeah. So what's the flavor of your triggers? And I want you to, what we'll be doing is exploring. So yeah, think, do, and then leave, as we know. What we'll be doing is exploring how they play out, right? But also the impact, how your triggers play out, and then the impact. And sometimes it can be really difficult to acknowledge the impact of our triggers. Firstly, our ego doesn't want to do that. Our identity, the mind of us doesn't want to identify the triggers or look at how they're impacting others, because that means that we'll need to give it up. We're actually catching it. We're catching it out like the hand in the lolly jar, right? So firstly, we're working sort of against our ego in a way. So it doesn't want to be caught out, and then it doesn't want to see the impact, because then it doesn't want to accept that hurt that we're causing. Yeah, the negative ripple effect that we're having. I'll share with you shortly about a leader that I worked with who had quite a significant negative impact on others until they realized, yes. And so then I want you to leave with new insights. Yeah, I want you to be hunting for the new. So as you know, if you've been working with me or you've been on these breakfast events before, we're always hunting for the new. And sometimes that can feel like something's wrong. But what about all these great things I'm doing? Yes, that's a given. You're already amazing. And now we're looking for those new doorways, right? What's the new doorway that if I can see what's really happening and I can own that, then that gives me a whole new level of empowerment and positive impact that I can have. And it's so much more fun, right? So much more fun integrating those pieces of ourselves, yeah, that otherwise stay stuck and trip us up. So those are the three things today: think, do, and leave. So new insights, and also, as you know, practical frameworks or tools. So remember, this isn't me entertaining you. This is a co-creation. When you show up here, we're doing the work together. So the practical tools and the new insights, so you've got to be looking for those. What is it that I can take? And also, this is for you to try on like a jumper, right? Or a jacket. Just try it on. And rather than do I agree or disagree, because that will only keep you limited to what you already know, if you can take those blinkers off and go, let me just try this on and see. Oh, it feels a bit niggly, or I'm not really sure, doesn't feel quite comfortable. Let me just sit with it for a moment and see if I can find anything new in here. See if it helps me unlock anything new. So that's what I invite you to do today. Participate in that way, and then share what's coming up for you in the chat box. I'd love to hear those things from you. Cool. All right. So because I'm at home, I forgot to bring my duster over from here. So now, lucky I've got some tissues handy. All right. So a while ago, a few years ago, I was working with a leader, and her trigger points were the way that it would play out is that she would blow up physically. So throw things, slam doors. I mean, I used to do that when I was 16 and I was angry at my mother, but she was doing it at this point in her leadership journey. And when she got to that point that it was such strong, intense reaction for her, then obviously people would really lean out and avoid her. Yeah. And she wasn't aware of the impact that she was having, which we would, if you were outside looking in, you might judge and go, how could you not be aware of that? But for her, the fight was within her, yes, but it was being expressed on the outside. And so it wasn't until years later that she had, a physical breakdown. And when I say breakdown, I mean, in her, the well-being of her body and her mind, that she realized that how significant this was for her, and also dealing with the impact that she'd been having on a lot of other people. So that's quite an extreme example of a trigger, isn't it? But the triggers that lead up to that are what's most important, because the final expression of our trigger is not where it starts, is it? It starts way before that, and we'll talk about that today, because I want you to start to see behind the lead up to that. But before you get to the point where you're starting to be aware of it, there's much more that's happened before then. So this leader now is leading very differently, communicating very differently, but it took a lot for her to get to that point, because she wasn't aware to what was happening for her leading up to that blowout, and then she wasn't paying attention because she was, when we're in that state, we're not present, are we? We're not aware of what's happening. And so she wasn't able to see that for herself until it was pointed out to her over and over again by someone sort of on the outside called me. All right. So one of the things I want to share with you is why our triggers are important, because a lot of the time we can think, well, life would just be better without these triggers if we just didn't have them. And what that has us do is suppress our feelings, doesn't it? Suppress what could otherwise be really helpful information to expand our awareness. So we start to get triggered, but then we push them away. And it means that we're not as awake as we could be to what's really going on. And Alexandra Eva May, who's someone that I really like, this quote that she shares. She has an Instagram page. She's writing a book on her journey through divorce. But her quote is, triggers can happen when you least expect them. And when you think all the emotional wounds are healed, something can happen that reminds us that there's still a scar. And I think that's quite insightful, because our trigger is like a hot button, isn't it? Where we go, oh, hang on, I thought I dealt with that. And a lot of women I work with will share that with me. I thought I dealt with that years ago. And I know what that feels like, because it can be frustrating that it's still coming up. But it means that we haven't fully, learnt from it, or sat with it long enough, or actually really listened in a way that we've got the full learning. Yeah. Because it's still there for us to, that we're reacting to it. There's parts of your story that you're not reacting to because you fully own them. You've integrated it. It's become wisdom now for you. And Dr. Joe Dispenza calls it, an emotional reaction. Emotion without the reaction is wisdom. So when we're not triggered, but we can feel something, that becomes part of our wisdom, doesn't it? But when we're reacting, that's still a trigger point, and it's still something for us to learn there. So I invite you to think today, what are the places inside you where you're finding those triggers that you thought you'd healed them, or you thought you'd forgotten them, or you thought you got over them, but it's still coming up for you. And the reaction might be that you're blaming other people, or the kind of people that keep showing up for you. There might be a pattern, or a situation that keeps reoccurring with someone. Yeah, there's a trigger there for you to learn from. So that's what we want to do today. All right, let me take a sip of water. Any comments or thoughts so far that you might like to share about your triggers? Pop them in the chat box. No comments so far. Still processing, still thinking. All right. So what is a trigger? If you think about, you feel them before I know that they're coming, Susan. So you're feeling them in your body? Yes, before you're aware of exactly what it is, or what this one is. So that's great. That's great awareness. And it's the piece that we're going to be looking at today, is being really in tune with our, what that feels like in our body. That's a key part of recognizing our triggers sooner. So very good. All right. So what is a trigger? So if you think about the emotional or physical reaction of a trigger, what is that for you? So is it, and so it might be tears, might be anger. What's the actual physical reaction? So as I said to you before, my definition is a strong emotional or physical reaction. Aileen says, I hadn't really seen. So if everyone's got on see all, you should be able to see everybody's comments, which can be great, so that in case I don't catch them all, you can read each other's. So Aileen says, I hadn't really seen Mo being quiet and withdrawing as part of the trigger, more just the big emotional stuff. Yeah, very good. And Abby says tears and frustration. Yes. And so the strong emotional physical reaction can take us into things like overwhelm, or really strong frustration. Can everyone see that? Not so much. Okay, I think I need to write bigger. It can take us into the fight, flight, or freeze. Yeah. So when we're triggered in the moment, or even for a period of time, we can go into that fight mode, or we can avoid. Yes. Or we can sort of get into that loop of just not doing anything. And that can be really challenging as well, can't it? Because we can't always see that. Defensiveness, very good, Tracy, so good, thank you. And we all have that sense, that ability to be defensive, don't we? Some profiles, some personalities, let's say, that can be closer to the surface. And sometimes the reason for that, or often the reason for that, is because we've been so generous and giving over our lifetime that now we're just sick of that, we're over that, and that guard can come up quite quickly. And a lot of women that I work with one-on-one and in groups, there can be that quality of that defensiveness underneath that they're not aware of, but it's only because they've been so generous over so many years and so many decades usually, that's become part of their personality. Other people can feel it in them, but they can't always feel it. So having this stronger awareness is really helpful for them. So Sarah says, so Aileen, avoidance, yep. Sarah says, definitely overwhelm, frustration and avoiding, yeah. And the other thing I would like to say, there's a sense of pain or loss or guilt that can happen when we have this strong trigger, yeah. And even grief, right, can be part of that as well. Would you agree? Yeah, Susan says worrying about getting the response wrong, reading the room or person incorrectly. Yes, so exactly. And so we're triggered because we're making it mean something, yes, and not realizing it doesn't mean that. I had a conversation this week about this, and it was something that I did actually that triggered someone else. And when that was fed back to me about, is this what you meant? It was like, no, not at all. I meant completely something else. So it was very interesting for that person who was caught in a trigger, and it was valid, and their feelings were important. But part of the evidence that person had collected, that the ego was out looking for, which is what we all do, and it's part of the human condition. Part of that evidence that person had collected was something that had been interpreted incorrectly, because it's certainly not what I was intending to communicate. So it's very interesting, that process for that person to understand that part that they'd grabbed to add to the story actually wasn't true. So that's something that we really need to be aware of and calibrate for ourselves. Is this true? Yeah, very good. All right, let me get this piece out and then some great comments. So I'm hoping that you're all seeing each other's comments, so make sure that you are, so that you can read them if I can't get to all of them. All right, so what is a trigger? So it's a strong emotional physical reaction, and it can feel like these overwhelm, frustration, fight or flight, pain, loss, guilt, grief, really, isolation as well, yes? Can feel like isolation, like disconnected, like we're alone in this. It can be a really powerful negative experience as well, can't it? Overthinking and ruminating, and then overcompensation to make it, oh, that's really interesting, Eileen. Make it the perceived right. Yeah, so overthinking and ruminating, so over analyzing, and then overcompensating by being nice. Is that right? I'd love to hear more about that. Okay, cool. All right, so that's what is a trigger. Yeah. And so have a think about what happens for you in your triggers. And then I want to talk about some of the examples of triggers. So for example, like a smell or a voice or a pattern of something being said to you. Yeah. Something sensory, so smell or a voice, a song, a touch, that can really remind us of something that hasn't been healed or we haven't learnt fully from inside of us that we're now calling a trigger. What else can be, can trigger us as opinions of others. So that feedback coming back to us that we've heard it all before, we've heard from them before. And that can often be from family, that quality of feedback that we get or opinion that we get to a certain point in our life and go, I don't want to hear that anymore. So that can be a trigger as well. Patterns. So you might have a pattern with a co-worker, colleague, or a boss or a direct report that becomes a trigger for you. So they're coming towards you and you're already triggered. So here I am again in this place when I'm trying to actually do something different with this person, this trigger goes off. So that's something that to be aware of. And our internal narrative. So these are examples, right, of triggers. Can Georgie or someone let me know that you can see this sort of okay, or do I need to bring it closer? So our internal narrative, like our story that we tell over and over, is part of the trigger, but that can also be the trigger. So it has us go down further down the tunnel that we'll talk about the tunnel in a minute. What else do I want to an event or situation. So for example, lockdown, right, in Melbourne, that can be a trigger, can't it? Because what we experienced last year, those same feelings can come back and trigger us again because we've had an experience now. We know what that felt like the first time, second time, third time. And then so now that can actually be a trigger to cause us go deeper, further down into a negative thought pattern or a feeling. Very good. Got some great comments coming through. I'll stop and read them in a second. So anything else you might want to say? Maybe I'll read them now. About an example of a trigger for you. The right is about reacting poorly, being, I'm reading Eileen's comment, being abrupt in response to a situation. Yeah, oh, okay, cool. And then overcompensate. Oh, very good, yes. So I react and then I be abrupt and then I calibrate. I go, so now I've got to overcompensate to make it all nice and happy again. I know that feeling, yes. That's been part of my pattern in the past too. Thanks, Georgie. That overthinking is quite common, isn't it? So any other examples that you've got of what a trigger might be? I know there's a trigger for me. I had in one of relationships years and years ago, and sometimes when I still smell the scent of that person, like the perfume or the perfume of that person, like I just wafts past, and when I still smell that smell, it brings back, whew, even though it's so long, like 20 years ago. It's really amazing how strong that can be, those senses, yes. A visual, we see a photo, something like that happens. I saw photos, actually I broke my phone recently, have a new phone. Somehow all these old photos have downloaded onto this new phone, don't know where they came from. And I was coming across photos from another past relationship. This is not a seminar about my relationships, by the way. And this person, I had no emotional reaction to, completely healed, completely gone, not even, there was no suppression, no nothing, just kind of like gone, that person. And so it's interesting, isn't it, what stays inside of us and what can trigger us in good, positive and negative ways. So Jen says the trigger was just a couple of words used. Yeah. So I had an experience where someone started to say something and I left my whole body tense. I felt my whole body tense up. Yeah, exactly. So you took a moment to breathe. Yes, very good. Just listen. So sometimes it's language, so opinions or words or language. Very good. Any other examples that you guys have about bullying behavior? Takes me right back. Okay, yeah. And what specifically, Susan, what when you say bullying behavior, is it, the person's tone? Is it the words that they use? What's the trigger for you? Or is it, a physical, someone might be standing up and you're sitting down? Is it that kind of situation? So it'd be great for you to sense into what's specifically about that. Okay, so observing it, so aggressive approach. And go deeper, Susan, for yourself. What does aggressive mean? So is it language? Is it the words? Is it the tone? Because that will really help you understand this trigger and start to kind of pull it apart, dissipate it, pull it apart from having this hold on you. because that's when we're at the effect of life and victims in our own life, when we're still reacting to these triggers, yes? Not being valued. And so, Nairi, what does that look like? So this is really good, guys. If you think about your triggers, and these are great examples when people talk over me. So that's really specific, Helen. Yes, thank you. That's good. Strong personalities or opinions. Strong red energy. Yes. Very good, Michael. And so what does strong, that word strong is really key there, Michael, for you. So what does that mean? What's your interpretation of that? How do you know something is strong? What does that look or sound like to you? That will be helpful. Yes, so it's thinking of one person, Jen, okay, so their tone and their words, yes. And then there might be certain words, so see if you can drill down on that as well. And so, guys, as we're moving through this conversation about triggers, you might get triggered, yeah, and I'm not being silly here, you might get triggered. So if you do, see if you can check in with yourself, use this space, stop, pause, breathe. It's okay if you're triggered, yeah, as we're talking about it, because you'll be thinking of things that trigger you, yes? And see if you can practice in this space to breathe it. Just sit with it and breathe it. Yeah. Knowing that you're safe here. We've got you. Yeah. And if anything comes up that feels, something that you can't deal with yourself, then please reach out to me afterwards. Okay. I want to really take care of the integrity of this space and make sure that you're supported. I'm just reading Naira's comment there. So, and Tracy says domineering behavior. And again, okay, Tracy, so go deeper on that. What's domineering? What does that look and sound like? And being passed over for opportunities and feeling, yeah, so there's a lot of great awareness here around our triggers, yes? Condescending talking. And what does condescending sound like? So can you see, guys, that we're wanting to get deeper into the next layer, because that will help you unlock why you're actually getting triggered. Because if we stay in that top layer, or that's helpful to identify that first, but we can stay in that and complain about it and talk about it and shy away from it forever. Yeah. And we don't actually get to the root cause of why that's hurting us or why it's causing pain for us. Yes. We need to get into the specifics. And this distinction here is what I call staying with the problem long enough. And there's a video on our YouTube channel and also posted on LinkedIn about how leaders don't stay with themselves or their people long enough in the problem and don't go deep enough into the problem to get to the root cause. And it's the same with our own personal journey. Same here. Yeah. Very good. So those things that you've shared, start to reflect now on what's underneath that. What's specifically around language, around aggressive behaviour. What do you mean by that for yourself? So have a think about that. So there's some examples, right? So now what I want to get into, what's my time? Okay. Here's my 30-minute check, Georgie. So now what I'd like to do is to talk about why it's important and why it's difficult to resist, right? So this is in an article I'll share with you, Harvard Business Review article about triggers. I really love the terminology and I'm going to use it and build on it. So this author calls it, being on the train of your trigger. So I'm going to call it the trigger train, right? I think that's quite catchy. So when you're on the trigger train, we can think, so we know, the trigger is about here, right? Or the experience of, what you've just shared then, all of those triggers. Can you say that? What happens for you when you get triggered? So we go quiet, we talk back over the top of people, or we feel really disempowered, and so we shut up, or we might retreat. We lash back out at others, or we go into overanalysis. Some of you have shared. That's fine, Georgie. And so this part here, and the leader that I shared with you before, this was like, let's say, the blowout, the throwing things, the yelling, the slamming of doors. Yes. So that's way down. And this is going to be called, we're on the trigger train in the trigger tunnel, right? So this is the tunnel. So think about yourself. So this is the point here where it's got to the extreme, and think of your kind of final piece around your trigger. Is it that you just, start gossiping? Is that when you know that you're really in your trigger? Is it that you just feel so tense that you just can't hardly breathe, right? What's the point for you that you know you're really there? Yeah. What we know though, that's the end, that's kind of like the end game, yes? What we often do, just move that out here. What we often do is that we need to come back to, we know we need to catch it sooner, but we think that we need to catch it here, right? Like what's the first point of our trigger? What's actually going on is, excuse me, sorry, I'm going to put that here. What's actually going on is that we think this is the first point. What's actually going on is it's much sooner. So as we start to go down our tunnel on the trigger train, right, we start to build, right? Like I was sharing with you before, the person I was speaking to this week, they were triggered. And then something that I'd said, they gathered to support their trigger, because now they're hunting for it. Unbeknownst to them, they're in a belief that something is a certain way, and now their brain is looking for evidence for that. And they grabbed what I said, and added it to their story, which was completely not true in how I meant it. But for that person, it fitted perfectly for the story, right? And the ego is very happy to capture that. But what we want to do is we want to catch this sooner. We actually don't want to catch it here. We want to know what's happening here. And Susan shared earlier, it's about the feeling, right? Can I feel when a trigger is coming? Because what happens is we're going to start collecting these pieces of evidence, right? Our brain's going to hunt that down until we get to this point where we're out of control. And we're thinking that somebody else is kind of running our life, right? Because we're just so not present to what's really going on for us, and this point here. So whatever that point is for you, but knowing that it doesn't go from there to there. There's actually what we call stops along the way. Yes. And we need to know what those stops are, because what happens is we actually want to get off sooner, right? We want to get off the train sooner. So we could start from the blowout and work backward. That would help. But that's quite a slow way of doing it. Yes. What I would like you to start to try is, when can I start to sense this first point? When is the first point for me that I'm starting to feel off? I'm starting to feel not aligned. Yeah. I'm starting to notice the narrative in my head is changing from amazing, what an amazing, beautiful day, to that person should or shouldn't have done that, right? So you've got to be listening to when your internal narrative starts to change. And that is key, because that's going to help you understand how far you've gone. And so here's the thing though, from here to here can happen like that, can't it? It can happen very quickly. It doesn't have to take minutes or the whole day. It's actually it can happen very quickly. So we need to be really aware and become more aware of what's happening here. Does this make sense so far? I just want to get your thoughts on this so far so you understand where I'm at. You don't need to apologize, Georgie. I'm just playing with you. Yes. So we're searching for the evidence, right? That's what the brain is wired to only let in what it already knows. So if we're triggered and then we believe something because we've gathered evidence, we're just going to be gathering more evidence for that. And as you've seen in a previous webinar, that stems all the way back to childhood, right? We won't do that today. But, the decisions that experiences we have, the decisions we make, and then we start to collect evidence along the way. Yeah. And that's going to interpret or inform, better said, the new triggers that we create. And then the brain will go looking for evidence for those new triggers. Yes. Very good. Excellent. Making so much sense. And then the self-talk starts and it spirals. Yes, exactly. When you're on that train, it's like it's just building. This is momentum, right? And guess what you'll do then as human beings? We'll start to get into sharing with our friends, right? We'll start to get, collect the opinions of others. will start to, if you start to hear yourself saying, oh yeah, we're all, everyone's saying this now. And an amazing leader who might be on the call today was sharing this with me yesterday, and I've heard it many, many times, and no doubt I've done this too myself, is that, oh yeah, I'm not the only one feeling like this about this person. Other people are too. That's a warning sign. That's a red flag for us, for ourselves, to go, hang on a minute, I'm starting to gossip, I'm starting to collect evidence. I'm actually now a victim to this. Yeah. So if you hear that in yourself, oh, I'm not the only one, we're all kind of experiencing this with this person, we all think this person is this way, then that's something that needs to be stopped right then and there, because that is heading down a tunnel with fast momentum. Yeah. So that needs to be a red flag, right? For you, for all of us. Yeah. Yeah. So being really aware in your language if that's starting to happen. So any other comments there? So make sure guys have got this bit. I didn't realize gossiping could be the response. I think that's mine. Yeah, very good, Charlie. Well done. So Susan says, I realize I need to network and connect to be energized, and I'm triggered if required to stick with the knitting, so to speak, to work with limited scope, adjusting to new unwritten rules and ways of thinking. Say more about that, Susan. All right. So as you're starting to head down your tunnel, if you know what your blowout is, what's the step before that? I'd really love to hear some examples, some specific examples of what's your step each way back, right? Let's see if we can catch that, because that will, although I said to you that's a slow burn, it will help inform you of what this piece is. Because when people say to me, yeah, but how do I do this? The how comes from the daily practice of awareness. And this is about, the self-care work that we do. And as I've said to you before many occasions, there's no substitute for this work. And so that's meditation, time in nature, journaling, yeah, learning how to take ownership of our integrity, so self-management. So those pieces are really important, and that brings us back to alignment. Yep. So when that helps us know when we feel like we're going off, starting to go on that train down that tunnel. So that's really important. Okay. $15 minutes to go. How did that happen? All right. So thank you, Georgie. Saw that one. So give me some examples, if you can, of what your blowout, what's leading up to your blowout. If you can start to see, is it about, what I noticed for myself, and these are things I want to share with you about myself, is that I noticed my language start to shift, right? As I said to you before, my internal dialogue, my language starts to shift from, being in appreciation, in gratitude, in possibility, right? From possibility thinking and language to blame and justification. There's a different flavor to my internal narrative and what I'm speaking. Yeah. My energy changes. So from free flowing and fun and dynamic, which is my natural state, as is yours, to tense and frustrated and then projecting, right? So my energy shifts into being really tense, and someone shared that earlier. And also now I'm starting to, look for evidence. Like, okay, so I've decided this, now I'm hunting for it. Not just my brain is doing it, I'm doing it on purpose. I'm hunting to prove myself right, yeah, about what I think. And that's when I know that I'm starting to head down this train. So these days I catch myself a lot sooner. Sometimes I still go further, but in the past I would go all the way down here for sure. And I would become really angry, but suppressed. And then I would self-soothe, yeah, and in negative, unhealthy ways, overeating, alcohol, things like that. And that was because I wasn't giving myself permission to be human, and to permission to know this stuff, and to have compassion for myself, that it's okay to be triggered, because it is. And if I can pause and breathe and feel my feelings and feel my emotions, then that's going to help me understand what's really going on. But there was none of that available to me then. I didn't know any of that. So I just tensed up, while my brain was working on overdrive, over analyzing, collecting evidence, and then, bam, and then take a deeper dive. All right, so is this helpful? Give me some feedback on whether this is helpful or not. And what's it? Okay. So what I want you to know is, if we think that we're catching ourselves here, this is kind of too late. Not too late in that it's not that we can't catch it, but it happens before here. So I want you to start to become aware much earlier of what your triggers feel and sound like. Can you really tune into yourself and start to understand when it sneaks up on you, right? When does it really start to become different? And as I said to you, those are my things: the language, the flavor of how I speak to myself and what I'm speaking to my team and other people. And my energy is very different. But I can sense that really early now. It's nuanced, it's subtle, but if you can find a way to really feel into that, you'll catch yourself sooner. But here are the reasons why you won't, right? And I'm going to take this off for a second. Because you can do this now, right? But the reasons why you won't, the reasons why we don't catch our triggers is because, as I said before, we want to be right and we want to avoid the responsibility of actually dealing with what's triggered us. So like I think it was Eileen, someone was sharing before about in that meeting, and we're triggered. Can we say, I'm actually feeling really triggered by what you shared. I just want to check in. Is this what you meant? Right? That's taking responsibility for our triggers. But rather than doing that, our ego would rather go here and go into all this righteousness and blame and justification about why someone else should change, right? So self-avoiding responsibility that's an example of what I mean by that. And this can be a tough one because we think that we're very responsible people, and we are, to our job and to our family and so on. But usually we're not very good at being responsible to ourselves and to our own well-being and to our own actual mental state and emotional state. So if we can start to own our triggers and say, and in the moment say to people, I'm feeling really triggered right now. And this is not about you, it's about me. But this is what I'm making up, and this is the story I'm saying in my head. I just want to check in if this is what's actually happening out here with you, right? And then that's a much more empowered state to have that person and have a different conversation with that person, and that person respond to us in different ways. Yes, Elizabeth says, very helpful. Previously, I'd been on a short trip to Blowout. I love that. The trigger train was going so fast, I did not even see or notice this important stations. Awesome. I love that I was going through prior to arriving at Blowout. So good. So well said, Elizabeth. Yes. So these are the stops or the stations. So when are you going to get off, right? You're going to get off. And very good, Elizabeth, because we can get off at any point. And we have now, everybody, this is for everybody, we are no longer able to say that we can't get off, because now you can't unsee this now, right? So now you can get off at any point. It's just about whether you're going to, and knowing if you don't, the reasons why. And it's usually because you want to be right about that person or the situation or what should change, or you want to avoid the responsibility of having to have those difficult conversations and owning your stuff. Owning our stuff is one of the biggest parts of leadership, and being able to be free with our people and say, you know what, I'm not happy with how I'm showing up right now. I need to go away and deal with myself. I'll be back soon, right? So those are the pieces there. When are you going to get off? Very good, Elizabeth. And then the last piece I want to give you is once you've gotten off at any point here, right? Once you've gotten off at any of these steps, that's helpful. Get off the train, right? If you can't do it here now, that's fine. Get off at one of these. But when you get off, what are you now going to fill that void with? Remember, I said at the start of the session, there's going to be a void there, like a vacuum that the ego is going to want to fill. So if you're not awake and going, I'm going to create something new here for myself, like a state of empowerment, inspiration, joy, creativity, if I'm not doing that on purpose as a state of being, there's going to be a void So on purpose, you're going to feel it, or is the trigger going to come back in? Because if you don't feel it, the trigger is going to keep going that way. You with me? So that's what's going to happen. Awesome. Well done. Does a trigger sometimes reflect what you can't see in yourself? For sure. Totally. Totally. Which is why we need to listen to them, Tracy. Very good question. So that sort of sums up the whole session, really, that when we're triggered, that's a whole new opportunity for us to see something new in ourselves that we haven't seen before. And why do we want to do that if it's painful? Why don't we just stay asleep and stay in our own train tunnel, right? Or the trigger tunnel. Why do we want to do that? Well, when we're leaders and when we're looking to serve and support others, when wanting to make a contribution in the world, whether that's family, community, or bigger than that, as far as number of people or environment, then owning our stuff makes us more powerful. Because if I can own my trigger in the moment, then I can go, oh, there's that thing there. Am I going to go down that tunnel and be disempowered and start blaming everyone and everything? Or am I going to come back to alignment and then choose something from a state of clarity, yeah, and possibility? And that's when we can innovate, collaborate, because we're not resisting or holding ourselves back. Yeah, very good. Hope that's helpful. I'm just going to read a couple of comments. Very good, Nari. Hopefully the reasons why I need to, well, and that's so good. You need to create that for yourself, yes? Why would I bother? And that's for all of us. We've got to want to be more on purpose than on trigger, yeah? So you've got to want this piece, this piece of alignment, you've got to want that more than you want to be right. Because it's only these two things that the ego's doing. That's all it is. And so, and that's a habit. And building the muscle to go, I want this more than this, is something that we need to practice. Yeah. We've got to want to feel good, really, is the point. And for me, when I got to that point of, I want to feel good more than I want anything else in the world, including any kind of anything. I want to feel good more than I want anything, right? That's when things shift, really. And you can become an amazing, leader, coach, creator. Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Georgie. More than I want to be right. Absolutely, very good. Other questions? Let's use this few minutes. What a pretty, beautiful board. Some would say messy, but I would say pretty. Definitely want to feel good. Yes. The right, yeah, being right. Yes. So Jen says, what if you can recognize that you've been triggered and you've identified why, but you still want to address the situation that triggers you? Totally. So as I said, once you realize you're triggered, so if you can give me a quick example, Jen, I can share with you. But the next steps are, as I said, creating on purpose. So creating on who do I want to be? And so this is about a state of being. And so our triggers, and this is the limitation of a 1 hour webinar, but hopefully I can address it. Doing all this work and then catching our triggers doesn't mean we lower our standards to what's okay and not okay by us. These go hand in hand with boundaries. So just because we're catching ourselves in a trigger, let's say there's aggressive behavior and we're triggered, we don't then go, okay, well, I better not get triggered and that behavior is okay. No, we own our triggers. And then if we need to or want to, we have a conversation with that person or in that situation or someone who can do something about that situation. And then, but we're having a conversation from a place of not being triggered, which is way more empowering and impactful and influential than if we come with our trigger. Yeah. I hope that makes sense, Jen. So the next steps are taking action from an empowered place. But often we think we're an empowered place, but we're still triggered. So the first work is to do this bit here and then step forward from there. Because here's the answer, Jen. Here's the real answer. Clarity comes from this first. So many leaders ask me, yeah, but what's the right thing to say? How should I start this conversation? That's the wrong question. There's no wrong questions, but it's the wrong question because we have to do the work to get back to clarity and alignment first, because guess what? The answer is then inspired within us. The right words come from that place. most leaders are trying to get the words right and it's the wrong place. We've got a video on that. I'll share that with you as well. All right, so we're nearly toward the end. I hope this has been helpful. So let me know any other questions or comments. I'm feeling you've not being treated fairly, wanting to address that. Yes. So, but Jen, do the work first to get yourself back to a clean, clear place. Yeah. And you'll know that when you know that you're no longer pushing energy out and trying to, and judging. When you get to a place where you can have true compassion, doesn't mean the behavior is okay, but you can have true compassion. That's when you know that you can have that conversation from a place of not being triggered. Now, you can go and have that conversation while you're triggered. That's okay. It's just going to have a different result. That's all. You might not have as much influence. You might have a different impact than what you would otherwise maybe want. Yeah. Awesome. I'm so glad you're here, Nari. Thank you for being here. All right. I'm happy to answer a couple of other questions. Is there anything else I wanted to cover? Let me just quickly see. So the downward curve of into the trigger tunnel is something that we want to catch sooner, right? And if you're doing your meditation, your time in nature, your journaling and the self-care work that is a non-negotiable in our lives, then you're going to be able to catch yourself sooner. So what I would like you to do is start to practice the feeling, sensing into the feeling of when you're here. Because by the time it's coming out of your mouth and you're talking to someone about it, you're way down the tunnel. Yeah. You're on that trigger train, it's going fast. It's flying by those stations, it's not stopping, right? So when you hear it come out of your mouth, that's down here. You got to catch it sooner than that, right? Start practicing feeling into catching it sooner. All right, so thank you so much for being here. As I said, if you'd like to know more about what we do a lot of online programs now. We've got not this set up, but a full production set up for our online programs once we're out of lockdown again. And we have our monthly webinars, these webinars every month for women in leadership and business. We also do lots of transformational programs one-on-one with senior executive leaders around their mindset, around their leadership capability, their communication, bringing people on a journey, casting a vision, all of those things. And we work with teams at all layers of business, helping them work better together. I live my dream every day. I'm blessed to do that. And I have an amazing team that have caught the vision and are working with me as well. So if you'd like to find out more, then get in touch, Karen@KarenWilliams.com. Check out our YouTube channel or see our website. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you and I acknowledge you for doing the work. And you inspire me. You are my heroes. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.